So welcome everyone to session 4, module 5. We're going to divide module 5 into 2 separate but yet equally important sections or training sessions. The first session we'll do today is about the project kickoff. It's the first 3 sections. You want to go to the next one? Huh. There you go. The esteemed David Fowler will be giving this today. Again, at the end there'll be a quiz, and these will be worth 1 AIA credit hour. So Barbara will be taking care of that for you. So make sure with your test that you put your test in, and that's how we tell attendance also. So with that, I'll let David take over.
All right, module 5. For those that started on the PM training a little while ago, and we went through the first rounds of this, module 5 is where we started. So we're really kind of wrapping back to where we've been. A lot of the same things you're going to hear today in a similar format, slightly different, but mostly the same items, but we're going to tailor it to the new quality manual. So project creation, that's the simple one out of there. That's really basically open our J number, but then we have project draft approach, which is, that's the project manager's plan to get through the whole project and their layout of what's going on there. And when I say the project manager, I mean that's the project manager's input from the whole team, everybody that's out there working with you on the team to get there, to get to the end. And then getting that information of your project plan approach to the internal kickoff team and prepping you for those items which are down there in gray to get our real working plan budget. That's going to go for Deltec, our client kickoff meeting, and then that affirmation from the client that our approach is good and we'll be ready to start into the meat of production work in 6. So this is right out of our quality manual. Really, it's probably maybe the mission statement, if you will, of project kickoff. So a plan is required. You really have to plan. You'll get value for all that time you spend in your planning. I can tell you as a project manager, sometimes I feel I'm writing my project plan. It seems like you tread water for a little bit. You're thinking about things. You're thinking about things that could go wrong. You're thinking about what you don't know. But as you're putting all this information together, those are good thoughts, because anything that you don't know is good because you've identified it, you can go find it, and you can plan for these things, and you can plan for the risk that comes along. But anyway, you have this plan. It'll be your approach. That approach might have a little bit of change along the way in your plan, but you're really developing a plan to get you there, and it will help you get to the end. If you really want the true reading of that, it's in the manual, but I'm giving you my piece. The other piece about this is a Design 1 checklist. So a long-standing item that's been around at Osborn, sometimes readily available, sometimes off for a little bit, but now again readily available on the bridge, is the Design 1 checklist. And very much of our SOPs follow inside of this Design Once checklist if you get into the detail on it, but they have a lot of input to what's going on. Most importantly, out of the Design Once checklist, if you summarize into one of the sections out of the Design Once, underneath this place called Authorization to Proceed, you'll start to see, and I went through and I wanted to just see how closely tied this document is to what's going on. And so it's talking about, again, this section that we're doing in 5 is called kickoff. And so, it's a kickoff meeting then scheduled. And here's the sections where in our SOPs that first block comes in there. Is a project approach being done? That's your basic plan. Here's the sections where this is talked about inside of it. Project status strategy, again, sections on side of there. A couple of these don't really have a strong tie-in into the list. Again, Design Once wasn't prepared, in essence, to meld into our SOPs that we have today but you can see that the majority of all the rest of them have some distinct tie-in to the approach, meaning there's validity of making a plan and an approach to go through. Don't need to go through the details with you there, but just saying, if you wanted a checklist to go through to get you from beginning to end of a project, the Design 1 checklist will get you there with pretty good success, and it actually follows in somewhat our SOPs that we have laid out. So we get to project creation, and so now you, as the project manager, you may be just arriving on the project right now. So basically, this line here saying after a project is received or awarded, the PIC, division head, or the project manager will be developing hours for the piece. You might also then be getting your notification that, hey, we're tapping you on the shoulder for this project, and you're going to start now. And so here's where you might jump in on the project. So everything we've done in 1, 2, 3, and 4 have all happened. You may have been involved with it, and you may not have been involved with it. I can tell you several projects that I've had, even large projects that I've been here at Osborn. I've arrived about this step. Maybe I've arrived somewhere in the step of 4 before everything's contracts negotiated or finalized. But I've arrived at projects in at this point. And at that point in time, as a project manager, you're going to have a lot of discovery to do. And you're going to have to go back and check that all of those items that were done and in place are there as you start to prepare your plan to go forward. But what's going on here, project creation, you have to get some type of hours in place. You have to get your project team to the best you know that's laid out to date. Get that into Deltek, into accounting, so we can have hours to charge to as we move forward into step 5 of what's going on. So everybody knows on the bridge, there's a project, there's a J setup form that gets updated from time to time. So if you keep one on your desktop and you keep referring back to it or change the old ones that you've been using from, they do send email announcements out from time to time that they're there. If you want to start safe all the time, just go grab it off the bridge. It's a quick little link to get to there. And then as the PM, this line item here is, and we've talked about that in the last time, now that true folder has been created for all the accounting projects and all the documents that have been built to date that are in the proposal folder. It is the time to move those over and bring them into our actually project directory. Once your J's set up, IT's created your folders, now you can move these items into place.
I'm not sure if everyone was on the BIM problem yesterday, but we have tried to shorten names. And I know maybe a lot of PMs might not have been on there if they're just a strict PM, but keep the name. We've kind of gotten a little crazy with naming things, and we do have a character path limit, so we're working with IT and everyone else from the PM side of how we're trying to shorten names within the directory structure, because it has been causing some problems in BIM and Revit particularly, some issues it's just been causing. So if you weren't on that call yesterday, understand it was mostly for production, but the naming of things is causing some issues, so we got to make sure we follow the standards.
And I'll add on to that too. It's not just in BIM. When you're a project manager receiving files, receiving zip folders from other people, you're trying to expand them, put them into folders, maybe even trying to extract them out and make your own zips later on, you'll end up with these crazy files of why did my file names all disappear? I've received that from a client before, to where things get truncated and we get star dash, hashtag, something, numbers, like, well, what happened to your A1 drawing that got turned into a character? Well, it got truncated. So I've experienced that along the way, and due to those file name links and the many folders that we have that go there. All for simplicity, but create some additional baggage. So project approach is something I want to talk about, and I'm not going to go into, in this case today, in heavy detail of each one of these blocks, because I think there's a good process laid out if you just read what's going on. But I'm not going to go into, I'll read the blocks, but we aren't going into the heavy definitions of what's going on inside of all these. So you have a draft approach. What do I need to do as that project manager? I really don't know anything about the project today. If you were the proposal manager, you probably know a lot today when you get to this step. So you're really probably just, it's easy for you to check off everything that you've known to date. If you're clean to the project, you have a lot more information going to pull out and figure out what you know and what you don't know, so you can start to answer the majority of these steps along the way. Again, you'll see none of these are read as mandatory blocks, but these are just memory joggers and things that are going to happen in a process that if you at least go through and say, do I need this? Yes or no? Mentally, do I need this? Yes or no? Do I have to do this? You'll find out that you're pretty successful in your approach because you've thought about a lot of these traps that we've had problems on projects. I've had problems on projects here or prior life with many of these items as well. If you don't do one, they come back and find a way to get you later on. So who's your project team? How is this project established? Who are those people you're going to when you're going to go start pulling resources and information as you're getting hours put together for your project? Who's on this team? And understand from who's on the owner's team, who's on our internal team, who the pick is, all the players that are out there inside of there. The design standards, establish these. And again, Doug's mentioned this, others have mentioned this, that they talked to. Not all of these are sequential items. You might end up doing one of these items first and the other one comes along, but they're just things out there, and because of a flow chart, they have to have some numbers, so there's numbers, but they're not sequential in any means. Design standards. Are we just doing normal Osborn standards? Do we have a client standard? Are we following a campus standard for a client that's on another piece of property? Lots of things out there. So you have to find out the design standards for the team. Confirm if we're licensed inside of the state and the jurisdiction that we're going to. So as remember in part 3 when we did proposals, that was an item that was visited. Now's your time to say, are we still there? Do we still have the professionals on record that we started the proposal with? Do we need to find a new professional record if that person is not available to be the professional record anymore, or if we decided to change action on that one? CAD standards. What are we doing? You know, we have a lot of options in CAD and BIM Revit work that's going on. Get that solidified, understand the basis of this. And again, this is the draft project approach. You're putting down what you know. And if you don't know it, it's a blank, but you got to go out and find it. But it's okay not to know everything at that point in time. It just gets you what you need to know. Software license of what's going on. Probably a harder one for the project manager to understand, but at least you're keying out to say, look, my project might have some specialty software that's going on. I have to talk to the disciplines, and I need to go out and find out, do you have everything you need to do your job as we understand it in this project? And then identify. And if not, we get the resources necessary, get the people to write the right requisitions for it, and then get the proper approvals and help pass that item through. Safety program. You know, we have safety programs involved that are just Osborn standard. We might be on a client that we're very familiar with, and we might know that they have special requirements on their site, special PPE requirements, special access, how you access and get timing to get on the site, times and hours we might be able to be on the site. Get those out and defined for the team. Change management process. This was probably covered in a contract that we're tied into back in 4, but if it's not well defined and if it's not understood, make the lay of the land so you can write in your project approach how it's going to happen. You know, a typical Osborn approach is an exchange is going to be identified. A design team would probably give you the internal design change notice that's available off of the bridge. That form will come to you as a PM. You'll get to evaluate if that's a real change out of the scope as you know it today. This is not to say we're evaluating change right now. It's just documenting how you expected it to come through. Then after you get the information, you reviewed it, you're going to say, yep, that's a good ASR. I'm going to prepare it as an ASR. I'm going to be able to submit that to my owner. Owner, you have to approve this ASR before I move anything before we move on the work. And then again, once that's approved, get that into accounting because that will change your budget and the amount of time you're able to spend and as well bill to the project. Typically, you could have a negative authorization to proceed as well. So that goes both ways. Prepare a project information sheet. So at this point in time in the project, marketing knows there's a proposal that went out perhaps on your project, but they don't know anything that's out there. But it's nice to get this project information sheet, some type of information that you normally fill out for a project at closeout on a project, but you're going to fill out the basics. Look, we're going to have a 5-story hospital building. I don't know all the rest of the detail, but I know a little bit. It's going to involve these 5 disciplines at Osborn. We're going to have these 3 sub-consultants performing work. We're going to do commissioning on something. You could put those all out there because we can still market against these projects that we're holding in process along the way. Outline of your permit requirements. So as the PM, you have to start doing a little bit of work to say, what do we have to do to deliver things? You know, we're going to put together our engineering documents. We're solid on that. But what are those permitting things that are out there? EPA permits, planning and zoning appeals, jurisdictional approvals, fire department approvals. Start to get familiar with where you're going so you know what's going on. And this is really being stated from my piece that we are the prime in these activities. So you would also, if we're a sub-consultant to somebody on these activities, we would be working in tandem with them, but realize that we're still going to search this information through. So you might have to work these communications through your architect or whoever the prime is when we're going through them. So eventually you get all this data down and you have this draft approach of how you're going to get to this project, and then you're ready for a kickoff meeting with your team. And so that's what I wanted to say, is getting ready for this kickoff meeting for the internal portion of our work. Basically, the draft approach, if you will, the big encompassing statement is get ready for it, but get ready for the project approach of your meeting. And if you develop that project approach, you'll have a very good chance of being successful. Internal kickoff meeting. What are you going to talk about? A lot of the items that we just talked about in that project approach, but get that information to the team. That's most important. You've got to get buy-in from your team. This would involve your sub-consultants as well that we might have on our team. Talk about the goals and understanding of the goals of the client and what's going on. You know, schedule might be the most important thing to a client. Maybe schedule isn't important to the client, but they want the best of whatever it is at whatever cost it takes. But remember, most projects, you don't get all 3. You don't get all 3 legs in the stool. Summary of the terms and conditions. Let's make sure the team understands how we're working. Are we lump sum fee? Is it time and material? How's the things working? Team needs to understand the dynamics of your project. Client manager is important in the projects and past projects, what's going on. So review the history of the client with the team. You might want to invite a client manager team, or the last lead that ran, the last PM that ran a project, or maybe a significant discipline lead from a project out there to give some input on what you might expect on your project. Some of that history is good for projects when there's history, or we have a very special client and we want to have hold them very highly, and we want to make sure that some clients are very sensitive. Well, we just told you that last project. Don't you know that? That's why we gave you this project. You don't want that kind of comment to come in there. So getting past history can be important to you. Review scopes, POs, deliverables, everything we have to date. Review the document numbering system, customary stuff. Maybe it's Osborn's. Maybe it will be an owner specific. I'm roll these through fast because I'm going to talk to you about preparing an agenda for handling this kickoff meeting. We'll get deeper in detail. What's important to know is in the layout of my agenda that I'm going to show, pretty much every one of these yellow dots have been covered in some way, shape, or fashion out there. And everyone is different on every project I get to. Review the project safety requirements. Again, that was taxed on is we might have our own or the client. Review the approach with the team. So your kickoff agenda, you're going to be there and say, hey, look, here's my plan. Here's where we're going to go, and get their buy-in. And then review the approach. This is a finalization. That's just your step, and now you're going to actually show it to your piece. So this is a bit sequential. What I put a little bit of clouding on this one is review the project approach. And this goes back to that design one checklist. Lots of stuff in there is out there. If you just wanted to follow something a little bit more sequentially or work off of a checklist, that exists out there for yourself as well. And we'll continue as we go through this process, find out if there's ways that we might want to tweak the design once checklist to maybe follow the format a little better, follow what we're doing in these SOPs, or make adjustments. Review change management process, talked about that in the last slide, but you're going to tell the team, here's what we're going to do, because you were really isolated in 5.2 as your project manager in your own little bubble. Now you're going to be sharing this with your team. Maybe you need a pull plan. Pull plan might be new words to somebody and what this is. But pull plan is really just a method to develop a schedule. And if you stay with it for that moment, it holds a lot, but it's sometimes in complex projects, pull plans get there. If we get into past the quality control manual layout and how the manual works, we'll get through some PM training, so we'll expand on those, and we'll probably have a session that's called pull planning at a future date. Review the project milestones and everything with the team. That's important because you can't hit your goals and schedules if you can't get buy-in on that. Understanding where the client's going on, the clients and the reviews, everything that happens, our quality, again, this program, and then meeting minutes to document where you've been. So it talks about this next slide in the manual, the 5.3, when it gets there, talks about the internal kickoff meeting. And that's the layout, everything was really just in those slides. But I really like to take this presentation now and to say, look, what are those items which might be on your agenda that you want to get out to your team? And I like to get my agendas, I'm stepping back, get this agenda developed. You're going to state everything that you know in your project approach and plan. You're going to be able to share that with them. And then you're going to tell them, here's how we're going to talk about these items in the meeting, and get those sent out early. Don't send it out the night before a meeting, because that gives your leads and your participants a chance to prepare and come prepared to talk about those unknown items in the project and give your feedback of what they know of the project, so you can build a better project together to get to the owner's kickoff meeting. So who should be at that meeting? Anybody on our team that's a player on that team should be there. Some discipline leads like to hold their discipline team a little tighter than others. Sometimes you have budget restrictions. You can't bring as many to the team. But the more people that can hear the message that you have to deliver, the stronger your team is. But at minimum, your design leads need to be there, and as well as somebody representing the sub-consultants. The PIC can be invited. They can choose whether or not to come. The division head can be invited, choose whether or not to come, but at least they know these meetings are happening. And your PORs should have some representation and the ability to understand and what's going on in the layout of the meeting as well. So recognize and honor their position they have on the project. So kickoff item number 1, that's really your attendees list. Project description and overview. Everything that you learned when you're saying about what was the proposal, what was in there, what's going on, what was in that marketing piece that you had. Easy stuff to throw out there. So if you've done those little bits and pieces, this is very easy to get out to the team, as well as saying, hey, here's the RFP, or here's the proposal, here's what we know today, and here's how I believe we're moving forward with the team. Well, project information sheet to marketing, that helps fill out some of this item. So that's just another item of what's going on. You can share that project information sheet with people to say, here's what's out there. The client's vision and goals. So typically in an RFP, they might state what they're trying to do on a project. Here's what we're trying to do. We want this product to come to market in advance of the 2022 Christmas sales, and we want to make this widget. And we have a lot to be able to be done, but we know we need a new building to make this widget. So we understand what's going on. And so their business plan and anything that you know about that can help our team understand when things come along, or we hear things in a meeting that say, well, we understand you want to do that, but that's against what you're trying to say, or maybe what's going on, or that supports what you're going, or the items to say is, there are a lot of smart people on our team to say, well, we could do that a little better, not just as they ask for, and we probably could do it cheaper than that way. But understanding that piece of information spawns that creative thought from those that are on your team. But just getting down these goals. Every one of these are not for every project. These are things that have been out there that have been customary from PMSJ, the project management group that's out there, things in my past life, things in others' past life that have been on agenda items. But those are just really some things to help prompt you to say, what do I need to talk to this team about as we move forward? We're going to share this project plan with our owner in the client meeting, but some items we don't want to share with that piece. But definitely we need to talk about in our internal kickoff meeting And this is assuming we don't have an external client or a sub-consultant with us on everything. Some of these items might be tightly held to Osborn, and some might be important to our sub-consultant. So you have to use discretion about what you're talking about and when you send this information out. But this is items that we're saying. It's like we might have a project to where you might be a lucky winner of as a PM to say, you're going to get this project. We really wanted this project. We wanted to win it, and we bid it really low, and you're going to have a tough time. But it's a risk to you and your project because you want to be successful, but you're going to be measured against some low metrics. But understand what's going on. Maybe we're taking a project that we don't have a lot of experience on, and we're going to try to do the best we can. And you're understanding, so the team understands where the risk is on your project internally of what's going on. They might be important to your project. Scope of work. This is probably the most important part that we have to do is get all that scope of work down on paper, pull it out of the RFP, pull down to what our exclusions, what we know, what we don't know, what's going through. So when we can sit before that client in the client kickoff meeting, say, this is what we're doing. This is how we are going to plan to attack around this scope of work. That if we set those rules and grounds out early, it's easy to manage change to your project later. And that's the real reason about getting this buy-in outside of there. The detailed schedule, lots of ways we can do schedules. We can do just a simple little bullet points on an email and just lay out a schedule. For small projects, you can do simple milestones. We expect to start this here. We're going to complete this here. Bar charts, they can be simple or complex in terms of Excel being easy or not. I have a couple of slides I can show when we break up this agenda a little bit at the end. But don't be afraid of a schedule. Sometimes schedules are people are afraid to write and make a schedule, but write down, as a project manager, write down those easy ones. Look, we know we're making a delivery date at the end. We know we're going to have quality control and POR sign-off. Start building your thing from and we know a starting date in general, and you know the ending date. Start filling out. We're going to have a 50% package. There you go. There's a milestone in the middle. What do you have to do to get to that milestone? Well, we're going to have a quality review. There's that. Now what do you have to do? You get all your reviews. You have your coordination dates, information you need from an architect or another sub-consultant. Start filling in those items out there, and all of a sudden you have a schedule build up if you just do a little bit of brain dump of the easy low-hanging fruits that are out there typically in a project. You know, maybe all your items don't end up on your final schedule, but at least you laid out the items out there to help you get somewhere. Pull plans are another way to help you build a schedule. Larger projects, and I can guarantee you, you've thought about pull plans in your mind, but you just don't know what they've been yet in terms of what's going on. Financial plans, probably not something for external distribution, but you know, it's important for the team to know in your kickoff meeting, here's how our project, we took this on a percentage fee. We're going to have to build now up our bottom up project. So you're going to lay out all your tasks, all your work, all your drawings. You're going to put hours to them. You're going to build and put team members to it. And then we're going to have some comparison and say, okay, well, how did we meet that proposal that might have been done on a percentage? And then there'll be some internal negotiations, discussions of what's going on. When you lay out your tasks, if you think about when you're laying out tasks for your work as to tell your team, you know, if you had a 200-hour task down there, it's hard to manage a 200-hour task. It's hard to manage team's production to a 200-hour single line item task. But if you can get your team to break down tasks in of like a 40-hour nature, somewhere in that, not hard lined around 40, maybe a little more depending on something, but they certainly don't need to manage tasks to a 4-hour level. But if you can manage them to groups of time, you can actually measure progress pretty good on something of what's going on. You can manage tasks to 4 hours if it's a title sheet as well, because you can understand if a title sheet's done or not in your tracking of what's going on. Construction cost model, maybe it's important. We're working on it if we're doing that, and maybe our fee is associated to a construction model. So it's important to understand how our fees going through there. And then as well, you should be having some type of an accounting kickoff meeting as a PM with somebody in accounting. I mean, we pretty much have it set up for the J handles the most of it. But if you have special things that are going on and special payments, special dates of invoicing, somebody else needs to review something that's going on, we're handling our accounting output documents differently than what the owner needs to be, then there's needs to have involve accounting so they're aware. So when your first invoice goes out, that they can actually process and pay it instead of getting kicked back and saying, hey, we don't do it this way. The earlier you get all of our ducks in a row for accounting to get a clean invoice out that they'll accept, the better we're off in terms of getting your cash flow for your project. I'll speak from that from lessons learned. Don't follow my mistakes of not doing that. And then you don't get the call saying, where's my money? Define who's doing what on projects. It's clear to understand electrical's doing A, B, C. That's easy. Some of those are very clear. Some aren't so clear. Sometimes I've had projects where electrical's doing fire alarms. Sometimes we're having life safety and fire protection is doing those items. But have the clear understanding who's doing those. If you're sharing resources between the teams, then get that understanding out and up place early between the two disciplines of what's going on. Understand what the owner's responsibilities and what we're expecting. The owner's really not involved yet, but list what we think the owner's responsibilities are going to be on the project, and as well, that gives your discipline leads to be able to say, okay, then I need A, B, and C from my owner on, and I need them in these sequential order. I need them by these dates. That builds your schedule. What's going on there? Sub-consultants out there, very clear. CAD BIM coordinator, that's going to happen. Very seldom you get into a project that you're not having this involved. Get that CAD coordinator involved, get them involved, get your kickoff meeting scheduled, get that piece out there. But again, assign that responsibility out there. Do we have any outsourcing needs for our project? Maybe we needed to meet some metrics that we might need for jurisdictional times in terms of how local participation in the community or whatever that might be. That's something out there. And then realize that we have multiple offices and we have resource sharing that goes around. And if you get on a project where you have resource sharing as a project manager, understand what that might mean to your team. It's not always obvious. And John, we don't have true structure set up to it, but I think the PMs just need to understand it's a little different than your normal electrical lead that's sitting on the same floor as you are working to it. So it's not the exact same. We're a little more accustomed to it in today's environment now because we're working, in distance. And so we're probably better able to handle it than we've been in prior years. But realize there might be some impact to your team, and you want to get the buy-in from people. From them being a PM, I want buy-in to say, look, if this guy's working on my job, I know he doesn't really report to my same people that I normally have in a chain of command. I want some accountability to it. So PM, you try to make sure you understand how that resource is coming to you or to your lead.
And I will add to that, we're talking on the high level. So this is discipline leads, or, a lot of times the manager might switch some people because there's a person in Florida that needs a little work and they help out with the job. This is on the level of, you could get a discipline lead from Detroit working on your job in Florida, or in Cleveland or Columbus. So, we're talking about that mainstay, that's someone that's constant to the job, that's, always supposed to be the guy there. So you want to understand, and what David's saying about some accountability, you have to trust his manager or wherever he's at is making sure that he's following everything that the person would be if they were sitting next to you when you could watch them or coordinate better with them. So we're not talking about the little person down low. We're talking about that division or that discipline lead.
Yeah, that's the strong point. Your as the PM, your discipline leads. That's your project, right? Your success, your project is how you guys you're together with your discipline leads as a team and working together as that unit. So awareness. That's really all it's for. It's just awareness. All these are for awareness, as to try to help you get the best plan you can out there. These are some memory joggers to think about. Some of them are important and happen on most all projects. Maybe our typical standard process to do something for a project works just fine. Maybe somebody, because our team and somebody says, you know what, if we do this now, I won't have to do all these steps later and we can skip doing something. Listen to your discipline leads on these project approaches and be flexible and understand what's going on. Some things you can be, some you can, but you might find ways to do something more efficiently, which anything you can do more efficiently and shave hours off of your overall big lump sum of hours, you can save that for a rainy day and perhaps take it as profit at the end and look like a hero by just listening and observing. You know, you're going to have some things. What's starting out? You know, your project early is you certainly on some projects, you just don't want to throw all your horsepower on a job the first day. You know, have some plan out there of how your discipline leads are going to approach the beginning steps of their project to make sure that they're cautiously using their budgets and approach to their budgets out there to protect your collective interest on the project. Any special delivery issues, permitting, AHJs, talked about that a little bit in the setups. Understand what's going on, communicate those items to the team. Maybe you have some early things you might have to show to a jurisdiction to get buy-in before you get too far down the road. Get those identified early before you spend bad hours, if you will. Understanding the project delivery method perhaps helps the team. Anything you know about it. Understanding if the owner is going to bring in even a client representative onto your team or a program manager that they have on their team. Those sometimes can add just another layer of complexity to your team that you're not ready for. And that probably means another set of approvals and or meetings perhaps, or another invitee to a meeting. CAD standards, that was talked about and again in the other slide, but those are important in terms of delivery. Outline of our safety program, Osborn, owner, contractors, they not going to be known at the beginning of a project, but I can tell you, Hoosier, we actually had the contractor on board at the start, so we already knew their standards available as soon as they mobilized on site. We knew those relatively early in the project, barely out of step 5. Document numbering systems, important to understand. Think about and talk about to your team your quality management schedule, everything that's going through there. When you're doing your schedules, where the reviews are happening, everything that you know the best ability, POR reviews, interdisciplinary reviews. Change management, I speak highly to change management all the time on projects. The more you define your scope, the better you define your scope. You get your owner to buy in on your scope out of your kickoff meeting, the easier the road is later to get approvals on change. Don't be afraid to get and walk through scope, the understandings of scope, what we're doing, get the buy-in so when change happens, we can rightly ask for the request that's going on along the way. Understand as well who approves scope is a very important item for the team to know. Just because we have an owner that we're working for, and maybe we're working, I'll overly simplistic, but we're working for an architect as our contract. We're dealing with a major owner's representative that works in having that, and then they have you work with the individual departments inside of the hospital or that system to go through and, okay, you get your detail off from this guy. Well, he says we're going to do this. It's a deviation from our scope, from our understanding. He's 2 steps removed from the architect, all right? So who are we taking direction from? Not directly from that person giving you that information, but it should be passed through the chain to say, okay, architect, they're asking us to do this. This is a deviation from our scope or the approach or what they're trying to achieve in terms of project objectives. And it could mean a scope change to us. Do you want us to go that way? Or how do we then tell this individual, we can't do what you're doing, and figure out a way? You have a chain of command in place. So remember who we're working for. And if you get your approvals in your kickoff meeting and say who can approve change, now you know where you can go. And just Bob, the second guy down the line, can't necessarily guide change to us. So we gather the information and we'll just have to manage that back through to figure out how we do with it. But if it becomes change, we know how to get back to it. Communication plan, you got to get these documents and meetings, approaches, review sets, who gets what. Maybe everybody doesn't get everything, but try to get out there who gets the items in the distribution. That's an easy conversation with the owner. And then as the project manager, some of these items you'll have developed in your project planning. You'll have some conversations with the owner along the way. You won't lay out your full project approach to them, but you'll be having some one-on-one conversations, maybe some meetings with them when you're laying out this approach. to understand what's out there. And you'll be gathering this little bits of information on the way. That's something great to be shared with the team. Your methodology for drawing exchange, how you're going to set up meetings, just the things that go on in projects. These are not everyone to be following, but these are little things that come along the way that just get affirmation and say, okay, or if not affirmation, say, this is how we're going to do this. And until somebody objects to it, that's our plan. And adapt your plan as necessary. Contingency and risk, it's good to know where our risk lies on projects. Sometimes we might have a project team, we might be very busy in an office, and maybe we can't staff a particular project with the strongest lead that we wanted to, and it's good for you to understand that. And it's not a problem. We want everybody to gain the most strength we can. So anytime we get a new discipline lead on a project, that's great. You just might need to know as a project manager, is the additional oversight necessary for that project lead that's never done this type of a project or never handled a project of this size necessary? Are we giving that person the proper support to be able to succeed in that special role that they're getting as that DL opportunity there? It's a risk. It's not a problem. It's just out there to say, what do I need to do special? Because it might be a little different than I have on a normal project. You could find many of those in your projects. It might be a code issue that's different and apply the same things. That's not normally how we do it. We can still do it that way. All these things are different types of risks, but the more you think about the risk that could impact your project, the better you'll be to prepare for them if they start to show up. Or as you're planning, just avoid them and how to avoid them altogether. More similar items, you know, we'll have owner's risk too that we can't control. You know, we have client is going to have approval processes and people and delays and things are going to be out there, additional stakeholders that you might not even be thinking you have to deal with. But the more you get from the owner, and it's good for the owner to understand, hey owner, what risks out there do you need me? Do you have approval processes that are difficult? Have things been stumbling blocks before in projects that we have? Learn from them to say, I want to stay out of these traps. And if I know this information from you, I can manage and be aware and be able to address if those items come up in this particular project again. That's where one of your client managers perhaps comes into play of bringing them into the project as well. Understand client reviews that are necessary to happen, and as well this list of items that you're going to believe are necessary from the owner to come to you. Typically in our proposals, we're saying we're not going to do A, B, or C. We've excluded them, but we need or expect items, certain number of items from our project to be able to do our work. Maybe they're contracted separately. Maybe they're not going to be contracted and they have them in a drawer somewhere. They just need to give them to you. But you have to get them out on the paper so when you do get to that client kickoff meeting, say, look, owner, I need these items. And as you're well working with your discipline leads, they should be saying, hey, in order to do my job, I need to do a certain number of things. That would be added to that list that the client got to be in there in that kickoff meeting to come about. Insurance reviews, another one, that's a stickler that catches things on projects from time to time. Be sure that when you're talking with a client on a project, if it's a big building and that it has a lot of insurance, kind of a lot of things going on, ask who their insurer is, ask if there's special reviews, ask if you need to participate in special reviews. Get that off your checklist early. Let them know and come back to you and say, nope, you don't need to give me anything from my insurer, I am good. Because now you can say, I've asked you and it's done, versus him coming up to you and tapping you on the shoulder 8 weeks into a 10-week project, say, hey, my insurance guy's got to review this. And that could change a lot of the work you've done to date. So avoid that, get it out early. Growing Osborn's presence to the client and finding ways for additional services, you know, that's kind of a PM responsibility as well. So, you know, if we don't have a particular service on a project, and maybe that client isn't aware we provide these services, you know, you can introduce them to these things along the way. As well, building additional services because, well, we're pretty far down the line. Our project, we can't hit your goals, but we can come up and say, in this one, the premiums to recover schedule. And this one says, in this case, because it was copied from a thing, client for failure to review and provide project direction on the schedule. Well, maybe it's really not really, in this case, your project. If the client says, look, I got started late, we didn't have our approvals, I really want to get to there, but I can't do it for the way your proposal was being done, maybe we could staff it differently. Maybe we can do more overtime. Might cost premiums to that, but we could find a way to escalate a schedule or something. But we can still help ways to help them achieve their goals. But it might be for additional fees and or added exposure to the services Osborn offers. Next steps, kind of now you're done with your kickoff agenda, but you might list your meetings on your agenda, say, hey, K team, here are going to be the next 5 things we're going to do before we meet next week at our next meeting. And it's a way to say, hey, don't go gangbusters on everything. Accomplish the little things that you need to do to keep your project in order. Again, schedule dependent. But things that are out there so you have focus of what's going to be able to move forward as you get to your next steps. After you have your internal kickoff meeting, you're going to be charging to get to a client kickoff meeting. But again, you want to make sure your team has enough reserve to not just go crazy and spending hours that aren't ready to be spent yet until we have affirmation of the approach. More items in the list of items. It's not necessary to go through them, but it's just things that are out there to prompt your memory, prompt you to say, what do I need to do based on your schedule?
So we do have a question. When you mentioned POR.
How do I, yes.
It escaped.
Thank you.
There was some question whether it's the engineer or it's the, is it program of requirements?
Professional record. I don't want to say EOR because you might have an AOR.
Person of record.
Professional record.
Professional.
I use POR as professional record, so.
So Jim Evans, you win. Yeah. Yeah, good job, Jim. Any other questions? Okay.
I want to, before quiz, I want to show some other sheets. That's what I want to show.
Sorry that I moved all that.
How do I get down to, are they in our blue beam?
Which ones do you want to show? This one?
I want to get, yeah. So, yeah, I'll start with that one.
Okay.
So there's checklists have been talked about and the message has been heard about what's going on. I mentioned we had the design once that's out there as a layout to get you to an beginning to end of a project outside of our quality manual. But we've taken a checklist approach now and have said, okay, here are all those bubbles laid out on one 8.5 by 11 sheet, maybe a little bit small print, but it's able to be done. Here's its number. Here's its sequencing number. Here's kind of layout and hierarchy. If it's red, it's a mandatory gate. That would be one of the ones that were circled in red that's going on there. And this is kind of a checklist for a project manager if you wanted to, because we're trying to tailor this to the requests that are coming in. It'd be nice to have a checklist. Okay, well, fine. There's all the buttons written down, all the bubbles written down. And if PMs can come say, well, project creation, one could say this one might need to be a mandatory gate because I got to do a J, so I got to do this step on the project. And pretty much that's very easy to say it's completed for the project manager. We can say, yep, I need this one. I'm going to do that one. I know I want to do this one in my project, and I'm going to have to follow these steps. Maybe I'm just randomly picking things. And they say, I don't really need to approach these items. These don't apply to my project. That's fine. And that means that now your list of all those overwhelming bubbles and activities out there aren't so important to your project anymore, and you could focus on the ones that are out there. So there's a checklist that has been created. It's not on the bridge yet, but it's out there to be done. And if you needed to put your own categories and notes inside of there, it's able to be done. We'll start creating these for other pieces along the way as well. So we're trying to work out at the moment the top portion of this and what these boxes might say, but simply when it says required, this is not required by an authoritative piece. This is for the PM to say, I want this on my project. I don't need this one, kind of a thing on the project. And schedule was talked about a little bit, and developing a schedule. And I'm just showing you a couple of things I use for very simple schedules. This one here on the right-hand side is just a Excel calendar of dates. It's running by weeks. I tried to show my Monday through Friday activities, and I don't know if I can have a Zoom function on this one. Nonetheless, I'm just showing what's going on. I might show, where is the Zoom, Sean?
Over to the very left. Keep going.
I can do it right there.
Hold control with your mouse.
I got it right here. So I just have a simple calendar. It's got a couple of blocks in there. Here's my weekly meetings. Here's my the owner architect CM meeting that's going through on a weekly basis. Here we're going to do a full team internal coordination. What's going on? We have a weekly internal DL meeting, and then there's a weekly team coordination on this project that we have. Just laid out in a simple calendar format. It's easy to see. All of our dates are highlighted. I highlight my holidays. I come in and I typically might share these with the team. I can't pan there. I'll come through and I'll show, look, I'm on vacation. I highlight some blocks. I'm going to be out this given week, so I know what's going on. If you want to highlight some things that you know your discipline leads or key people in your team are out, it's good for people to see because you understand I probably won't get good response time during that on items. But just getting to the end as well, if I'm doing team coordination with the architect, I'm showing reviews. I showed 90% reviews of a project happening in our quality control. Our interdisciplinary reviews are going to happen at a point in time, and then ultimately we're done. Our professional records have signed off on our drawings. We're issuing to the client on this day the specs. We're giving our drawings on this day, and then the architect sending that final submission on this day. So it's just a quick way and a very simple Excel rolling calendar piece that you can export out of your normal calendar out of Excel. I also have another very simple one that's maybe just what was the control Dan, what's my key for zooming?
Control and then
Oh, it's the same one. I'm thinking I'm in Excel. I'm thinking I was in Excel for a second, but I'm not. I just list down, boom, here's a whole bunch of dates. And this is another, maybe you don't do this way. Here's another way to do it. Here's a whole bunch of dates. Here's a whole bunch of tasks that's out there. Here's when I want to start them, and here's when I want to end them. We probably know when you're going to start, and you probably know the easy one, when are we uploading the final drawings down there at the end. Start populating some dates out there, and then as you get smarter about your schedule, you get input from your team, you'll start to figure out if you can actually accomplish things and you're going on. But this is simple enough for some projects. That's enough schedule to get you very far, and it's enough detail as you need. Another way of taking that same information, I got to pull this down very slow, is that same date that's down below is actually extrapolated into a little bit of a Gantt chart along the way. Same topics were on that line. These are just have the bars and a little bit of activity to show what's going on. So it's easy to do in Excel, little bar charts, little Excel charts. You can do the bars. You can just do a little simple matrix on there. Another simple one in Excel. Don't have to be a highly sophisticated piece of information to get some graphics out to your team to be able to use. So lots of approaches as well. There's Microsoft Project out there for very complex critical path method charts as well. I think that's what I got.
Any questions? Bonnie, thanks for sending that over to Mike.
It's just the kind of person I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's not go too far, Bonnie.
I have to make sure that I take care of Mike. He's a good guy, always saves me a seat.
Mike would have preferred it if you filled in the answers.
So Shelley had asked about these checklists. And Dave kind of answered it. As soon as we get the top worked out, which him and Jackie are working on, we'll start posting checklists to the bridge. The design once is on there already. There is an internal project kickoff meeting one on there, but it's really Scott Johnson's. So, part of the QA/QC committee is the better thing. So maybe that develops into a a little better agenda, or maybe Dave will take one of his agendas to give people kind of an idea of where to start. We can post something like that to the bridge too, so.
So our quiz, different than previous ones. I didn't write all the questions. I didn't write any questions, to be honest with you, on this one. So our quality committee stepped in and is participating in developing of questions. And these questions, just sharing the information that's going out, it's actually ferreting out a little bit of information to say where is some clarity maybe lacking, or not, or we're not clear, or we have a form that we don't have, or a process that we don't have yet in place as we go through there. But some good quiz questions today.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we take the quiz? All right, so did everyone else besides Mike get the quiz, I hope? We can start with question number 1. A project folder may be created on the P drive before the J number is created in Deltek, only if authorized by who? Should I help them with the answers?
Hush now, we don't want that recorded.
He doesn't want what?
I heard the grumblings in there about answers. We don't want that recorded.
No, we really don't. Okay. The change management process should be established Number 3 is the PM's job to verify we have the necessary software, P licenses, and review the permit requirements. Number 4, preliminary discipline work plans for the first mandatory gate should include anticipated drawing list and the associated hours required for each drawing, hours for specifications, meetings, calculations, quality control checking, bid administration, shop drawing review, responses time for RFIs, and record drawings.
Man, one little miss of a comma and you get hard to answer that one.
It's hard to answer. Number 5, whose responsibility is it to communicate the overall project and client goals with the team, such as budget and schedule constraints? Number 6, 5.2.8 states that the PM shall prepare a preliminary blank for marketing. A lot of A's, didn't you? I mean, not that I said that out loud.
Yeah, you know, it's how they.
How people said them.
Yeah. I didn't rejuggle anything.
Number 7, the PM and blank will present the plan document numbering and revision system along with an overview of the project document control plan. I do love this answer sheet. Oh, I like this one. Once complete, where is the J setup form sent? The J setup form.
Undoubtedly, it goes to Gary.
He wants all that. Number 9. Reviewing the client history should include things such as how the client is to work with blank, blank, client expectations, site conditions. Ooh, I like this one though.
I'm telling you, they're good questions.
Good question.
Good questions, good answers.
Number 10, the project manager is responsible for assuring the project team has all proper licenses required to complete the project. All right. You know where to send it? OEC training, that's how we keep attendance record, and how we get your certificates. 10/20 is the second one. November will be the second half of 5, then we'll probably skip December due to vacations and stuff, and January we'll begin part 6. I do not know, Sandy. I will check with Barbara. We just got our first one approved, so we have to send it out. It takes them 4 weeks to get things approved typically. And Barb's working on that with Mike, and she developed a certificate, so Barbara is working on that. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.